Hi, I'm Dr. Walter Matwichuk, and the purpose of today's video is to talk to you about the ABC framework of rational emotive behavior therapy. It amazes me that people attempt to use REBT without fully understanding the ABC framework and being capable of defining what it means at each level of the analysis. A stands for adversity, and that's the negative state of affairs that you encounter that is associated with your emotional upset. Now, the adversity can be in the past, it can be something that you think about in the past and distress yourself about, it can be something in the present, and it can be something in the future that you anticipate happening. Now, in each of these circumstances, you make a hunch about either what happened in the past, what may be going on in the present, or could happen in the future. It's not your hunch, it's not your hypothesis that gets you disturbed. It's the attitude you bring to your hypothesis that largely leads to your emotional upset. So in rational emotive behavior therapy, we encourage you first to identify the adversity and what you find distressing within the adversity. But B in the ABC model stands for your basic attitude. Now remember, an attitude is a deeper level thought about your hunch. The attitudes that lead to emotional disturbance are rigid attitudes. And the theory of REBT says that you want to identify your rigid attitudes when you're upset so that you can address them. Now, at point B, there are three basic attitudes. I have to do well. Second attitude is you have to treat me nicely. And the third one is life has to be the way I want it to be. Now, you may not use exactly these words. You may say, I absolutely should not make mistakes. Or you need to treat me civilly, or life absolutely ought to be fair. So it's not the words that we're targeting in REBT, it's the underlying rigidity. You can think of this rigidity as also demandingness. REBT targets demandingness or dogmatic thinking. Now, humans take their desires and escalate them into rigid attitudes, and that's when they disturb themselves about the hunches they hold. So what we want you to do is to first identify the hunch at point A, adversity, but then identify the underlying basic attitude at point B. Now, remember that you want to go beyond identifying your rigid attitude. The theory of REBT says that it gives rise to one of three derivatives. Now, one derivative is referred to as awfulizing. Awfulizing is an extreme rating of how bad something is. And it suggests that it's more than 100% bad and that no good can come from it. The second derivative attitude that comes from your demandingness, your musts, your absolute shoulds, which are primary, is what we call attitudes of unbearability. Now, these attitudes can be directed towards an adversity. Like, for example, you may say, I could not bear to lose my job and have to go and find myself another job. That would be a great hassle. I couldn't bear to make that effort. But you may also have attitudes of unbearability that are directed to an internal experience. So, for example, people might say, I don't like anxiety and I can't bear it. So they get anxiety about anxiety. The third derivative attitude is what we call devaluation, attitudes of devaluation. And here you devalue either yourself, other people, or life itself. So people may very well have attitudes like, well, I have to do perfectly well, and when I don't do perfectly well, I am lesser of a person, or if I fail, as I must not, I am a failure. So you devalue your human worth based upon your performance. The second attitude might be, you have to treat me nicely, and if you don't treat me nicely, that makes you a bad person. So now you're devaluing the other person, and then it's the third derivative attitude when you devalue would be directed at life. You might say something like, life has to be easy, and if it isn't easy, it is totally bad. Or life has to be fair, and if it's not fair, then it is completely bad, is completely, totally bad. And this overgeneralization will help you get disturbed about life itself. Now, the third element of the ABC model is what we call consequences, emotional or behavioral consequences. And these consequences are the consequences of holding particular attitudes. That's what people don't always see. The consequence of their rigid and extreme attitudes lead to unhealthy negative emotions, which we also call emotional disturbance or emotional upset. So the consequence of thinking rigidly is to experience emotional disturbance. And emotional disturbance very often leads to self-defeating behavior. So the ABC model helps us use each element to understand the whole experience that we're going through when we're upset. The ABC model is something you must be able to define in order to effectively do an ABC analysis using this framework. Again, A stands for adversity. That is the hunch you have about what's going on that you don't like, and that hunch could be in the past, in the present, or in the future. And it's not the hunch so much that gets you disturbed, it's your B, your basic attitude about that hunch. And your basic attitudes are, I have to do well, you have to treat me nicely, and life has to be easy. And they often give rise to one or more derivatives, like it's awful, it's unbearable, or I'm bad, or you're bad, or life is totally bad. And finally, our emotional consequences, C, our consequences are both emotional and behavioral, and these are unhealthy negative emotions. Now, REBT has 9 of them: anxiety, depression, hurt, guilt, shame, unhealthy anger, unhealthy jealousy, unhealthy envy, unhealthy regret. And the idea in REBT is to isolate the rigid attitude and the extreme derivative that is leading to your unhealthy negative emotions. And then you begin to modify your basic attitude so as to have a healthy negative emotion. In REBT, we think healthy negative emotions are inevitable when you face negative states of affairs, when negative things happen. When you have a hunch that you're ill, you can either be anxious because you think to yourself at point B, I must not be ill, or you could have a healthy concern, such as, I don't want to be ill, but if I am too bad. So our REBT really relies, effective use of the REBT relies on the patient understanding the ABC framework. And therefore, you really need to understand what these letters stand for in order to help yourself. Because in REBT, we don't want you to become dependent upon the therapist. We want you to do self-therapy. So I hope this video clarifies these important elements. More importantly, I hope you get in the habit when you are emotionally disturbed of identifying the elements of your ABC experience your emotional upset, identify the adversity, identify the hunch you have, and whether it's in the past, the present, or the future. More importantly, identify your rigid demand. Look for the should, look for the must, so that then you can have healthy emotional consequences at point C. I also hope that you will go to my website, rebtdoctor.com, and take advantage of the free resources that are found there. These will build upon your understanding of REBT. And I hope that you join me on Saturdays, because every Saturday I hold a demonstration at 9 a.m. Eastern where I take a volunteer and I talk to them about the ABC framework as it applies to their particular problem. And by attending these sessions, you'll learn how to begin to do self-therapy. You'll learn how to identify the A, the B, and the C, and see how REBT applies to a wide variety of problems. You can write to me at rebtdoctor@gmail.com to get the link. And I use the same link every week, so once you have it, you don't have to write again. I hope that you get in the habit of thinking about the ABC framework, and I hope you commit to memory what each of these letters stand for in the ABC framework.